Cool. So here we are with Kate. How are you doing, my friend? Before we get stuck in, the flex behind you. Look at all the medals, the belt. Look at this. Talk me through which one's your favourite? Which one
Yeah,
meant the
that's
most out of
bad,
all
isn't it?
those? Go on.
What medal? What's my favorite medal?
Yeah, which one was like, you know what, this is the first one that
Um,
really meant the world to me. The ones look like a bit like, you know.
I like the ADCC one because it's a cute heart. But it's also one of the most annoying medals because it should be gold, but it's silver. So I don't know. But it's a nice shape.
Oh, so we start off on this side of things. So why should it be silver? What happened on the day then? What?
I just fucked up. It's one of those fights that you lose by a sweep that you don't know that happened, and like the points are not even on the board until after the fight. So you think you're going into the overtime and you actually lost. It sucks.
Such is life.
Yeah.
Such life. Well, on to happier notes anyway. So congratulations for your match in Empire. A little round of applause from our surely audience. Now that was an interesting one because you had was that last minute replacement? Because you remember the fight was it Hana Garrett, I think?
Yeah. So I think there was quite a few girls that were asked to be a replacement, but obviously now it's strange times. Not many people train. A lot of them have work commitments. It was very short notice as well, so it's quite hard to find someone to replace Hannah. So yeah, Paula agreed to do it. We've already met a few times, like in a bunch of tournaments, both gi and no gi. So I was quite surprised that she took it. But yeah, like well done to her. Like respect, mad respect. Yeah, she took it. She was the only person to take that match, so definitely mad respect.
This is it as well. And when it comes to your training anyway, so when lockdown hit, how did your training really get affected? Were you doing a lot from home? Was it like carrying as normal? How did you find, staying active?
So I had to definitely slow down a lot because before lockdown I was training like a mad amount of hours, like sparring at least twice a day, like 2 hours a day, plus my technical sessions, like striking, grappling, S&C, everything. So it would be like 5 hours a day, 6 days a week minimum. And then suddenly lockdown hit and I had quite a few fights booked and like a lot of plans and I had to obviously adjust. So to be honest, the first couple of weeks, I think I was just like all over the place and like smoking loads of weed and being really lazy. And then I was like, right, I need to get my shit together and do something about it. And I was actually fortunate enough to have access to the gym for the whole lockdown. So I just literally focus on weights, on prehab, rehab, sorting out all the injuries that I've picked up over the years, and just like all these little bits that usually you don't really have time for when you're training so much, like combat wise. So I did a lot of that. And I did a lot of yoga, and then whenever I could, I did do a lot of illegal jujitsu in some like forests and like Seafern and some dodgy like industrial complexes. So funny, like sneaking in with mats just to get some rolls in.
Do you remember matching your car, just drop them down somewhere in a car park, later get a couple of rounds in, and then just sneak off like you're trying to like some sort of drug dealing, this, that, and the other. So
Literally.
that brings me on to an interesting question then. So when it comes to weed and jiu-jitsu then, what's your mindset with it? Do you smoke before you train, after to recovery, during, I don't know, between rounds? I don't know how you do it. What's your kind of like...
I like to mix it up. So it depends. I think it definitely helps with recovery and it does help with focus. And especially with jiu-jitsu, it allows me to flow better, be a little bit less like, I don't know, hard on myself and just allow myself to get into bad positions even more and find my ways out of it. And just like everything links up a little bit better. I feel like I can think a bit more as well because I don't care about my roles as much. So that allows me to actually be better at them, if that makes sense. But like when it comes to like striking or MMA, I feel like, yeah, this definitely doesn't help me with my performance. So especially when there's like hard sparring sessions, there's no way I would like get high and go to like a hard MMA sparring because I'd probably like get murdered. But yeah, I feel like it's definitely a nice tool in terms of recovery. So is CBD really. So I sort of use both, but like CBD is like lacking that tiny bit of something. I think like in terms of like, yeah, in terms of like biochemistry behind like cannabinoids and all of that, there's, when you start extracting like compounds out of a plant, obviously you end up missing something because there's so many cross reactions, interactions between substances and in whatever like herbal medicines that you need to take the whole sort of plant to be able to get 100% out of it, I think.
There's a lot in there to sort of take out of that. One thing you said initially at the start was being quite hard on yourself and then trying to like take that pressure off. Like after training, do you beat yourself up quite a bit for performances? Do you give yourself a lot of like, can you pat yourself in the back when you do well? How do you deal with that kind of self-criticism?
Interesting question. So I tend to be really hard on myself. I'm very critical of myself, and I do tend to get very frustrated when I'm not performing well, when I feel like I should be doing better and I'm getting smashed, or I'm just not performing to the level that I would like to perform. And I do tend to get trapped in that cycle of like negativity and just being like, this is shit, and my jiu-jitsu is not getting better, and my fighting is horrible, every sparring session is worse. But then I have to sort of like distance myself from that and be a little bit more objective. But it's hard, you know. Like yesterday I had like probably the worst and the best sparring session of my life. And yeah, I definitely gave myself a lot of shit after that. I'm just feeling like quite upset, being like, what the hell, why was I so bad? Because it was my first proper MMA sparring in like 2 years probably. And I was expecting it to be horrible. This is why it took me so long to get back into it, really. But I didn't expect it to be that horrible. So then after the session, I just felt like, oh my God, like, this is terrible. My body is shaking. My mind is crashed. Like I could see my soul leaving my body at least 3 times, but I was just like holding on to it. But then like, you know, you need to snap out of it and just like, you know, pat on the back, be proud of yourself. Like next time's going to be better. Like whenever you feel like really shit, like probably next time you're not going to feel that bad. You know, there's good and bad days, and you just have to sort of like sink in with it. And whenever you have a bad day, sometimes you end up training on a bad day and you actually perform really well, and sometimes it's just not going to happen, and you need to accept that those sessions are going to happen. You have to like make the most out of it in whatever way possible, and there's always a lesson in it.
Now, the way you're answering that's quite interesting because you started off very much about you, then you went very general, like, oh, it's what people should do, try and be like, you know, be positive at the end. And again, it's interesting how,
Preaching.
no, but in the sense of you went from saying, this is how I feel to, okay, this is how you should feel, should versus how you do. So talk me through like a few things with this then. So obviously when it comes to being competitive and training so frequently, like if you train one in every 10 sessions is one of those shitty stressy ones, and you train like once a month, you can feel all right for most of the year. Whereas if you train like
Yeah,
3 times a day, eventually you're going to get a shit one, that
exactly.
kind of thing. So like always balance and then trying to deal with these mistakes and this, that, and the other. What is
And
your
also like it's a matter of like weight difference in training, or like power difference, because sometimes I tend to forget that I'm a female and I'm smaller, generally smaller than most of the guys, and I probably don't have as much power, don't have as much, I don't know, like the explosion and like muscle power in me, and I tend to forget about it. And sometimes I have my friends just reminding me, like, imagine if everyone was like 20-30 kilos lighter than you, how easy would that be for you to just smash everyone? And like sometimes I wish I could swap my body with one of like the heavyweight jiu-jitsu guys and just go around like other gyms and
smish?
like smash everyone. That would be so satisfying, but obviously ain't gonna happen, so gotta work with what I have.
Now, this is another sort of point as well when it comes to sort of female jiu-jitsu and the fact that more often than not, the purple belt and blue belt girls are normally absolute monsters, and it's horrible. They're horrible to roll because they're technical. They do it properly. They've just got the card, everything else. And whereas the blue belt, purple belt guys, there's always like a bit of a hybrid, a bit of strength, athleticism as well. And this is kind of, how do you think you roll? Do you roll like a girl? Do you think in that kind of primarily technical kind of thing, or do you try and almost roll like a man in the sense of trying to, I don't know, compensate with extra athleticism, trying to prioritize that? And see what I mean? It's a bit of a weird one to ask, but you get where I'm coming from.
Yeah,
Sort of mindset as
I
such.
understand it. Well, I think the way I roll is very unorthodox. I think this is the best way to
Mm.
describe it. So I've sort of mixed everything into it. I definitely have become more technical, but I do use my strength a lot, and I do use sort of like that explosion and element of surprise a lot. So I just come up with like the most ridiculous things you could possibly do that nobody else would do, that would put me in a bad position, but I make them work for me, for my advantage. And I'm just like very difficult to hold on to. So I think um, like being very hard to control in rows helps me as well, because I just try to constantly move. I try to be very dynamic and fast, but I do use my techniques a lot more these days rather than power. Yeah, I think.
When it comes to your roles as such and your sort of techniques and the way you think about when you roll, do you have certain principles you sort of follow? Is it concepts? Is it like shapes? Is it like, prime example, if my back's on the mat, I've lost. I need to make sure I stay on top. Things like that. Do you have like little cues you've got, or is it very much okay? I have this position. I have a technique. How do you like to think when you roll? You see what I mean?
So obviously it depends whether I'm working on something specific, because I
Hmm.
tend to switch between like different things that are my prime focus. So if I'm trying to improve my wrestling, then I'm trying not to drop for legs when I know I have to wrestle for it. Or if I'm trying to work a little bit more from back, I'm trying to get there and I'm trying to finish it there rather than like switch for amber. So it really depends on my focus. But the way I learn, in a way, the way I improve, it's most inspiring. Like I'm really bad with just like drilling or watching instructionals. I can't focus. I've got massive ADHD, and it's just really difficult for me to like look at something, because some people, they watch a technique and then like literally 10 minutes later they'll do it on someone, they'll remember it forever. For me, I can literally sit in a class for an hour and do the same thing, and then like the next day you'll ask me what I was doing, I wouldn't remember unless it was something that actually stuck in my mind. But then inspiring, sometimes there's like little things, and like someone would just say like something like completely like irrelevant thing to them, like a very simple thing, but for me it's just like suddenly linking everything up together, and then I'll remember it and I'll try to use it inspiring. I'll see it working. Like I don't know, like some time ago I realized that like when you keep your elbow and your knee together, it's very difficult for people to pass your guard. So no matter what you're doing, whatever shit position you are, if you're able to keep your knee and your elbow together, they'll have hard time passing your guard. And like it's such a simple concept, but I just changed everything because it's simplified it, and I was able to focus on that in my sparring. So I think it's just like concepts and like bearing that in mind, and the little things that link up everything together, and just trying to focus on that inspiring in actual like rolling.
So do you think that's why the weed helps? It sort of slows you down, so you'd be able to, I
Yeah,
don't know, take the edge off as such.
I think so. Like, especially like taking into account my massive ADHD, it definitely helps me to just slow down a little bit, because sometimes I just have like 10,000 thoughts at the same time, and then I'm not really doing well. I'm getting frustrated. I'm putting a lot of pressure on myself. I'm doing even worse, even more tired. And it's just like, it gets too much. Whereas with this, I'm able to take a step back and sort of like distance myself from it and be a little bit more chilled, a little bit more relaxed.
I mean, it definitely gives extra layers to the whole general stress you have anyway from training, competing, and putting pressure on yourself. Now you've also got like a some mental, what's the word, condition I want to say? That kind of the way you're sort of being programmed to then think in certain ways and have these extra processes and extra ways of trying everything else on top of the natural, already processed things you've really got. So when it comes to, I don't know, your development and the way you've managed to find your style as such, because the way you've described it there is being in that class environment doesn't quite, I don't know, you're not quite comfortable, you can't quite sit still, you don't like to, you can't quite enjoy it the same kind of way. How did you get into that kind of, I don't know, not to get into martial arts such, but get into this format? Because again, if you're not used to that from the word go, how did you find getting into this?
Or like learning things inspiring, that's what you mean?
Yeah, just yeah, kind of thing anyway. Because again, if you go into jiu-jitsu in a class format where you're not liking
Yeah.
the class format, from the word go,
It's not
it
that I
must,
don't like it. I just don't
okay.
don't feel like I'm learning that well. It depends like what the class is on. If it's something that relates to my game like heavily, I'll probably be better with like actually paying attention and all of that. But if it's something that I don't know, it's just like not useful to me, or if I'll come to like a gi class and it's like loads of De La Hiva stuff and I never use it really, or like spider guard, I'm like, oh my god, like this is just like, I know I need it, but from the other hand, I'm not really using it that much, so I won't be able to focus as much. But like when it's something related more to my game, like I'll be able to like make the most out of the classes. Not that I don't like it, it's just like I don't really learn that well.
Okay.
But I think like it took me a while to realize it and accept it, that I just can't push it and I can't like try to learn through drilling. I need to like try to do some drilling, but like if I learn best like sparring, that's probably the best way to do it, like specific sparring especially.
It's like eating your vegetables to try and, get through it and that kind of thing. You have to sort of get on with it a little bit with some of it. But no, it's interesting the way you're saying different ways of learning. I think that's really important, especially in the world of jiu-jitsu. The whole thing is meant to be adapting and developing. And if people set in their ways that you can only learn this way, that's kind of, a bit against the point a little bit.
No, I think it's like with learning in general. Like when I studied neuroscience, we obviously had quite a lot of modules on memory, and
Drop it
that
in
was
there.
sort of like prime focus of my research there.
Oh,
Um,
oh, when I studied
and
neuroscience, I just dropped that in that conversation.
well, yeah, because it sort of relates to what I was gonna say. But like, there's basically different ways people learn. So like you can't really force it. Like some people learn more visually, so they're able to learn better when they see something. Some people it's more like auditory learning, so when you hear something. So obviously like listening to podcasts and stuff can help you like
There we are.
actually get smarter. And then some people have to write it down and so on and so forth. So there's not like one way that is the best or the one way you should always like aim for. It's like you need to figure out what is the best way for you to learn. And it's not only with like sports, with anything really. But it takes time and a lot of experimenting. And sometimes just because you don't like doing something doesn't mean that it doesn't work for you as well. You just have to force yourself to do more of it until you're actually able to say whether it's benefiting you or not.
So let's go into this a lot more then. So neuroscience, then why that specifically from your background?
Here
Is
we
something
go.
has always been mindset's been a thing as such? Because again, when you're saying about like, like ADHD and that kind of thing, is that almost inspired that trying to understand it more? Where's this sort of come from?
So I sort of studied fine art first, so I'm an artist, and that switch to neuroscience was a little bit like a sudden thing. But that basically happened because I ended up being in a hospital in the neurological department for about 2 weeks. And that sort of forced me, I had a lot of health issues, and that forced me to stop my Thai for about 2-3 years. And in that time, I just realized, when I was there, I realized that like neuroscience is basically just people like trying to feel the brain inside you, trying to figure out how your brain works, like the brain trying to understand itself. And I realized that it's like fairly complex and fairly new field of science, and people don't actually really know what's going on with most of the things. And even those doctors there, like in the hospital, which, you know, spend like 20, 30, 40 years being like neurosurgeons, neuroscientists, like they had no clue. When it comes to like, you know, nervous system, it's so complicated that it's just sort of like trial and error when you're trying to like help someone who's got some condition, or you're trying to understand something. And I just found it so intriguing. I don't know why, but I'm always attracted to these things that are like hard, that are difficult. Like I never felt like I would like something that's really straightforward and easy. It's like the harder it is, the more messed up it is, the more attracted to it I feel. So even though like I spent years studying like art and obviously being an artist and all of that, and I didn't touch science for years doing that, I like forced myself to do all the sciencey parts just to get like my exams done, and I got to uni. And yeah, I loved it. But like from the very beginning of the course, I knew that this is probably not going to be something I'll stick to in my life, because I do find it extremely interesting, but I just can't imagine myself working in a lab. Like when I had to do it over like the uni course, and then doing a little bit of research after that, it's just so boring. Like going into freaking lab like 8 a.m. until 5 p.m. and there's the same people wearing the same fucking jumper, drinking the same tea from the same mug,
Wearing the
chatting the
science
same
skis,
shit,
their
watching the
lab
same.
coats and that.
Oh, I just couldn't stand it. Like I'm more of that mad scientist of like crazy ideas, but when it comes to actually going to a computer, because science, yeah, a lot of people think science is super interesting and fascinating, and it is, a part of it is, but the actual practical side of it, like analyzing data on a computer for hours and hours, is not that fun, and it's something that I wasn't willing to compromise. I can't like be bound to like a single place for so long. Like there's just no way.
So with all that being said then, so you've gone from fine art, which my brother does, which I give him a lot of shit for, so I'll try not to give you that much shit as well, just because, you know, fine art. And it's because again, you got something very like, again, being subjective and open to interpretation, you don't have definitive guidelines. Whereas with science, it's very much like math, very much yes or no. And then the data can change and the answer will change from that
Not
specific.
necessarily.
Ooh,
Not
ooh,
necessarily. It
oh.
depends on what type of science, what field of science. Like that's the thing with neuroscience. This is why I was so attracted to it, because it's like literally you just come up with an idea, and you sit there, you're smoking, you know, you're smoking up, talking with your friends, and suddenly like, oh shit, how about like our brain actually does this because of that? And then all you have to do is just go in the lab, find a way to test it, find a way to prove it, whether it's yes or no, and then you get enough data to back up whatever answer you got, if you got one. Because like obviously a lot of times you don't get one. Like with my dissertation, I didn't get an answer. It was just like explaining why it didn't work for the whole dissertation. But you get a certain answer, but then obviously you're gonna find that there's like 10 other labs working somewhere on the same thing, and they're gonna prove you wrong, and you have to like carry on the same thing. And just like, you know, I think science is actually very fluid. It's not like yes, no, blue, red, you know, there's like a lot of gray zone. And I think you can pretty much find contra evidence for any evidence. So there's nothing like set in stone with science really. It's quite abstract. The more like the deeper you go into it, the more you realize that it's actually like a very broad aspect of like different answers, and yeah, it's way
Okay,
more complex than I think it is.
that's to say, my initial point there would have been you've gone from somewhere open-ended to somewhere a bit more closed, but then you've still got that same element of being open-ended and constantly evolving. And then with the same kind of idea that progression and with your own goal setting and own sort of, I don't know, the way you like to process your challenges, process these goals, do you like a definitive, I don't know, structure to where you're at and where you want to go to? Do you like just feeling out as you go along? Like, take belt systems, for example. Like, do you give a lot of weight to the belt you're at now to the next one? But do you just do it competition based? Where's your actual, like, I don't know, value in your career? Where do you give that? Your jiu-jitsu career? I don't know what you want to call it. I don't know. Training. You just,
Mhm.
until you start getting paid properly, you just
Mhm.
call it training. It's fun.
I think I've got like a bunch of like bigger goals,
Mm.
but it's not something that is like the holy grail for me, and I do everything to get there. It's like it would be cool to do this and that and to be there and whatever, but like, you know, as you go, as you're training, as you're progressing, as you know, you're taking all sorts of different fights, and you mix up your training, end up being in different gyms, sparring with different people. Like it's all affecting your journey, sort of, to get there. And there's like a lot of different pathways you can choose on the way. And I'm not someone who's like gonna say no to the opportunities I see around me just because I've got a different goal in my mind. Like I'll say yes to everything on the way, but I'll still head the same sort of direction. So I'm not someone that would say that like I've got like future goals that are set in stone. It's definitely more fluid. I just go with whatever the universe gives me, and I try to make the most out of it. But I sort of know I've got a sense of direction. Let's say it this way.
See, I meant that more in the sense of, do you need sort of milestones to try and really, and like progression to a milestone? So you say like, I like in a game, you get experience points and you go up levels, that kind of thing. So you've got, okay, I'm this far into this part, I need this kind of recognition to know where I'm at. Whereas, for example, you have stripes in a belt. Because again, where you're saying with your goals in general, that's a very interesting principle. The fact that it's not, I don't know, that ADCC goal that, you know, keeps you up at night. It's a different, it's going to be different things, this, that, and the other. It's going to be the next competition, whatever one you want to call it, but more in the sense of, okay, where you're constant progression, do you need that kind of measuring point? Or are you okay with your own sort of analysis of where you're at? Like, where do you need that kind of structure as such?
See, I don't. That's the
Mm.
funny thing. I never actually needed that. And like, even as you like mentioned stripes and stuff, I never really cared about it. Like when I was a white belt, like a lot of people were like, "Oh, come on, you're not a white belt. It's time to be blue." It's like it was depending on me, and like I never really felt that like need to get another belt or to get a stripe or whatever. Then being a blue belt, like few months in, they were like, "Oh, come on, you're not a blue belt." It's like, shut up, like, come on, like give me a break. It's like I don't think like maybe it's a good way for a lot of people to like stay motivated, but for me it's like doesn't really matter. And it's, in terms of anything else, I don't really have like milestones or anything I could like measure my progress with. And I don't know if it's a good thing or a bad thing. I don't really care that much. It's just like I work this way. But I do like to be busy, so I tend to always have some fight booked in for the future. Like if I don't have an event or any fight booked in, I tend to get quite distracted. And yeah, I don't know. It's just weird. It feels like I'm doing all of this, and like, especially when I have those bad days. If I don't have a fight booked, I'm like, why am I doing this? Like, what's the point? I'm only getting shitter with time. Like, and there's no like realistic way to like test myself. Whenever I do have comms booked in, though, it makes a huge difference. I love that feeling when you like have a really tough camp, you have really tough few days, and then you go into a competition and you realize that, oh, these people suddenly are your weight, your size, and everything that was so hard to get, and the bunch of like massive beastie guys, like suddenly it's so much easier. And I tend to like do way better in comps than I do in sparring, which is great. So I'm really looking forward to competing every time. So before lockdown, I used to compete like almost every weekend, and that was sort of a way for me to like stay on track and stay motivated. Now it's a little bit harder, but at least, you know, having a couple of events booked in into the future, it's something that I would say is like my goals that I'm trying to achieve.
Now, your competition experience is opposite to mine. I'm getting smashed by girls in the gym and get smashed by bigger guys in the on competition. That's a different conversation. I'll cry. I'll cry about that after this podcast. That's fine. But when it comes to that in itself, anyway, then, so you touched on something, I don't know, relatively poignant there. That when you haven't got things booked, you sort of get a bit sort of, what's the point? This, that, and the other. Now, what does training mean to you on jiu-jitsu and everything else? Because again, everyone's all like, jiu-jitsu saved my life, it's the best thing ever and all that. And I'm a bit biased because I like jiu-jitsu, I train it. But What does it mean to you in that sense? Is it a case of trying to compete and trying to develop? Is it something that gives you outside of that? What does jiu-jitsu do for you?
I think it's doing a lot of things to me, but the prime reason why I'm like sticking to it is because, again, it's like with neuroscience, it's something that it's so complex. There's so much to it that it's really intriguing me. Because with like striking, for example, like once you get your basic techniques and you get all of that, it's just a matter of putting it into combinations and then working on endurance, working on explosiveness, working on just combining it together. But it's all the same techniques in a way. Whereas with like jujitsu, there's always more to it. And I realized like over years that the more I knew, the more I seen that there was more to learn as well. So it's like a trap. Like once you get into it and you really get yourself into it, it just like carries on. It's like an enigma. Like you never get the answers, and you get an answer, but you get like 10 more questions alongside this answer, and it's just like there's more and more and more. So yeah, I don't know. Like I think it's sort of like my meditation as well. I've been actually talking about it to a few of my friends recently, that like I'm not a person who can just sit still and like meditate. I've really tried it over years, and a lot of people try to help me, and they're like, come on, okay, you just have to do it this way and that way. I can't do it. As soon as I try not to think about anything, I just think about everything, and my mind blows up, and I feel like I start getting stressed. It's like with me not being able to take a nap. I'll be then I'll force myself to take a nap, no matter how tired I am. And I used to work night shifts. There's levels to being tired. I still can't sleep. Just because when I tell myself to do something, to tell myself to relax, not think about anything, nap, I can't do it. So like my way to meditate is actually rolling, because it's like I just get myself so into it that I stop thinking about anything. Like I'm just doing things. I'm just like rolling. My body is doing things. My mind is not really thinking about anything. It doesn't feel like it's thinking. So it's the only time in my day that I actually get a break from like that constant like rush of thoughts and constantly thinking about something. So I like that. I like the meditative like aspect of jiu-jitsu as well. And like not getting punched and kicked in the face definitely helps with like
It's always nice.
in the zone.
Now, there's a term for that, and I absolutely love it. And I love the way you explain that. It's called active meditation. And again, for the exact reason you've explained that, and the same principles apply to that. That if you try and sit still, have you seen the adverts for, I think it's Headspace or one of those like self-help apps, whatever it is, the meditation ones. Like when you try and
No.
like sit trying to think about like nothing, you think about everything, stress, all this, that, and the other. And it's just that kind of thing that when you're doing anything else, like I don't know, like driving when you first learn to drive is beyond stressful. But when you're doing that, you're not thinking about things at home, things at work, this, that, and the other.
Yeah.
And again, when you're under that kind of not stress is stress is the wrong tone of word, but that kind of you have to be present, you have to be there. Like if we're rolling, and then you start thinking about, I don't know, did you leave your washing on the line? Are you doing this, that, and the other? Then you're gonna get caught with stuff. Whereas you at least be aware of what's going on. I mean, maybe what we're on, you'd probably be choking me out. That's a different conversation. It's more an example. At least for my own egos, for an example, it's fine. but
Exactly.
but yeah, that in itself. So when it comes to life outside of jiu-jitsu, then what are the things you like to do? Do you like to have a divide from training and life? Because again, being very busy, I wouldn't imagine just solely jiu-jitsu can be your entire world then. Like how do you find time outside of jiu-jitsu?
Yeah, that's a tough one. And I do tend to get myself trapped into like, I don't know, a few weeks, like some periods of time, like few weeks, of couple of months, and I have a lot of competitions. I don't get to do a lot outside of it. And it gets quite tiring. And then again, like this lockdown actually like taught me how to manage my time a little bit better, how to step away from training sometimes when I feel like I could actually take half a day off, and that's not gonna like have a massive impact on my game, on like my performance. Whereas before I was like, I can't skip a session. If I skip a session, it's gonna be like the end of the world. So now I'm being more chilled about it, and I'll actually like find time for other things. But yeah, like I do like to do some art still, believe it or not. I like to read books, photography, traveling, seeing some people, just having like some of those like never ending dumb conversations. I like driving, so sometimes I just go for a drive and like listen to music. Like there's a bunch of things that I tend to do that are just super random as well. Like I don't know, like I had this like what was it, like I did a DJ set, a live DJ set. I taught myself how to like work a program, like a DJing program, in like 10 minutes. I was like, right, I'm putting a setup, guys, tune in. So I do have a lot of like random ideas. I don't have like certain go-to things. I just do whatever I feel like doing at the moment, like whenever I have time for it.
Let's get the shades on, like, oh, tune in 7 o'clock. This, that, and the other. What kind of stuff do you read?
So it depends. Like, to be honest, like I feel like sometimes I look at the book and it literally like attracts me, like something attracts me
You
to
judge
it,
the
and
book by the
I'm like,
cover, so to speak.
not really, not even that. It's just like it's either the title, like very, very weird specific things about it. Like sometimes I look for a book like I specifically want because I don't know, I've heard it's good or whatever. But yeah, sometimes I'll just like find it on the street and like something tells me pick it up and read it. And even when it's like super shit, I've got this principle, I have to read it to the very end. Otherwise it's like I'm giving up or something. And I think like even the shittest book's got some like meaning behind it, some lesson in it. So I just try to read it. But I do read a lot of books on like psychedelics and like psychotherapy, because that's something I was very interested in. Like some psychological books, like some like self-help
I
whatever
hate
books,
that.
but like some of them are just terrible. um, and yeah, I don't know. Like I really tend to mix it up with books. I read everything and anything.
These random books that fall. What you find a book on the street and you read it. That sounds like a film at the start of something, and then you're like, yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's interesting, sort of mixing there. Because I wasn't sure if you'd go for a more, I don't know, dystopian kind of fiction kind of side of things, or again more cerebral, more, I don't know, maybe philosophical again. Because when it comes to this many kind of ways of going, like you said there, the enigma of sort of conversation and how it can go in different avenues. So I'll ask you a question about training. We'll go on to mindset. We'll go into how you feel when you lose, and then you go on so on and so forth. And you think, oh shit, what if I lose? And then you go on this whole massive thing of, is that okay? Where does my value lie? Do I feel guilt when I don't train? All this kind of stuff. And you start getting into Nietzsche
Because
and
it's
like
all
Sigmund Freud, and
interconnected,
it
you
gets
know,
exhausting.
it's all just branching out, and there's like infinite possibilities with everything. And it's the same with conversation. It's like neurons or like constellations or whatever. It's all sort of the same patterns. It's like the same fractals, but they're like so different. So it's like, you know, the concept of fractals. It's like sort of the same elements coming together, but they're like creating something completely different. Depending how you look at it, you see different things. And it's sort of the same. And it's like with the universe and the nervous system, the neurons, it's just like so many possibilities. And it's all one, but completely different.
How do you find with staying to one thing in the sense of like a team, for example? Because again, if you've got this very much like, you know, not can't settle as such, I want to say, you sort of, got to stay busy, got to do this, that, and the other. And again, having that kind of open-mindedness to want to be able to change, try something different. How do you find with staying to a specific team or specific things? You know what I mean?
So I've actually left my team probably like 2 or 3 times. And every time I did, I thought I'm never going to go back, but I ended up coming back. It was because I moved countries or I just went traveling or whatever. And I did train in a lot of amazing gyms, but in the end of the day, I ended up coming back. And like the way my coach actually described me recently is like, I'm like a yo-yo, I always come back, which is quite funny. And I think the reason for it is the atmosphere in my gym is really good, and like my coach gives me a lot of freedom. It doesn't really feel like it's my coach, it's like my really good friend. And because a lot of coaches can be funny with like cross training and you traveling for training to other gyms and all of that, but he's someone who actually allows me and even like insists on me going cross training other gyms, so I can freely talk with him and tell him like, oh yeah, I went to that gym, this gym, whatever. And he's cool with that. Whereas there's a lot of coaches, like for example my striking coach literally like banned me from the gym, and like he had sort of an attitude that like he didn't like his fighters to train in other gyms, even though it was like specifically striking gym. Even if you train MMA and you train like Jujitsu somewhere, like it wasn't an option. It was always funny about it. So I think a lot depends on like the coach's attitude as well. I think if my coach was like, oh yeah, you're not allowed to cross train, you're not allowed this, like if he gave me shit for like going to other gyms, I definitely wouldn't stay. But because I've got the freedom of like expressing myself and freedom of going training anywhere else and like taking whatever fights I want, doing whatever I want with my career in a way, but constantly having the support to a degree, like just like made me stay, even though I tend to float. But I'm always sort of bound to this gym.
I think that's really important having that, because again, my gym's in similar sort of tone of like cross training. Yeah, train where you want, no real stress. If you want to go there, stay there. But what happens with that, interestingly enough, is people will go to other places, but they'll come back. Whereas gyms I've been at where they don't not so much encourage it. They go actually say against the whole career. You can't train at other gyms, this, that, and the other. I'm thinking, okay. And you'll see the amount of people who used to train there who don't want to come back, they don't feel comfortable coming back. And again, it's interesting, that layer of insecurity. And again, it's our contradiction to martial arts, the whole kind of thing of evolution and what works now, what didn't work then, this, that, and the other. So it's interesting. And it's more, when I'm asking this sort of question, it's more the same way trying to understand how you think about this kind of stuff. Because the way this conversation's kind of gone, it's the same kind of tones of, okay, a free spirit, I want to use the words. Because again, you've got this kind of...
Yeah, I've heard that before multiple times, trust me.
Oh, yeah.
That's a nice way to describe it.
There we go. Again, you got your own sort of views on things. And again, it's not just a set in stone view either. Because
No,
one thing you said earlier I really liked was, even if you don't like something, sometimes you appreciate it's good for you, and the way you have to stick with it, and the way you can do that about your own things as well. Because it's all well and good saying to someone else, eat your vegetables because you know they're good for you, but when they're on your plate still and you haven't eaten them, that means absolutely fucking nothing. So it's good that you've been able to apply it to yourself. Now, one very important question before I leave you to enjoy the rest of your afternoon is, where can people find you on the old social media?
Sorry again?
Where can people find you on social media? What are your Instagram and Facebook and all that?
Purple Supernova 7. That's always the same. And yeah, like, you're probably gonna ask how that came about, because everyone always asks. There's a long story to it. And yeah, funny enough, like, as I said, when I studied neuroscience, like, I wanted to change my name, but I could go to Purple Supernova. And then my friends were like, come on, so you want to focus on like psychedelics and like psychotherapy, and then what, like, you're gonna publish a research about like Dr. Purple Supernova on like how to use so that just wouldn't work. And I don't know, sometimes I regret I didn't change my name, sometimes I don't.
I mean, wasn't planning on asking, because imagine you've been asked a lot, but I'm glad I got the answer all the same. But yeah, the links to those will all be in the description. And remember, guys, this is sponsored by Fight Fuel UK. Be sure to support them as well. They support all this podcast and the podcast as well.